Mark Cuban accuses Donald Trump of dishonesty and blames him directly for sky-high gas prices. This statement, coming from the mouth of the well-known businessman, resounded like a thunderclap, causing many to doubt the former president's impeccable political reputation. But what is behind such harsh criticism? Is it just a disagreement in economic views? Cuban claims that the matter is much deeper. It's about ethics, or rather, the lack thereof. According to him, Trump's approach to leadership, both in business and in politics, has always been associated with questionable practices. Cuban does not hesitate to provide specific examples that cast a shadow on Trump's business reputation. Remember the lawsuits surrounding Trump University which left students feeling deceived? Or controversial deals such as the failed Trump Soho project, which became a symbol of risky and perhaps not entirely clean business practices. Trump's history in business is all the evidence anyone needs, Cuban declares flatly, hinting that the former president's political decisions may be dictated not by concern for the people but by personal gain. While Trump's supporters call Cuban's accusations politically motivated slander, his critics see this as confirmation of their long-standing fears. Is there only cynical calculation and a desire for enrichment hidden behind loud slogans and populist statements? The question remains open, but one thing is certain: Mark Cuban's statement has challenged public opinion and forced many to reconsider their attitude towards Donald Trump's political legacy. Friends, just think about it. We are faced with a character whose morals make you shudder, and honesty is just a mirage in the desert of the political circus. "I don't care, he's mine," shout the blinded fans. But wait. Character, gentlemen, is destiny. Now imagine the chair of the President of the United States. No one knows what storms will hit the country tomorrow. The past is just a pale shadow of the future. And at this moment you need a person with a crystal soul, capable of empathizing, willing to learn, and, most importantly, unwaveringly ethical. How can you seriously consider the candidacy of Donald Trump when his moral compass is clearly broken? And how about this twist? Mark Cuban, a man who sees numbers right through, accuses Trump not just of bad politics, but of deliberate sabotage. Decisions made by Trump in the energy markets have shattered the already fragile well-being of ordinary Americans, driving gasoline prices sky-high. The administration is in a panic because this accusation is like a bolt from the blue, especially from a person who knows the value of every cent and every strategy. Friends, just imagine what a political circus is unfolding before our eyes. Mark Cuban, not just some armchair critic, but a business shark, a man who built his own empire and is known for his directness, has launched a scathing criticism of Donald Trump. This man, who tears startups to shreds on Shark Tank and goes straight ahead in his business projects, has now taken up politics. And when such an authoritative person declares that Trump's decisions are harming the country, it sounds like a thunderclap. But it's not just about the confrontation between Cuban and Trump, but about the fact that these accusations call into question the very leadership, trust, and what kind of person we want to see at the helm. And while Cuban continues his exposé campaign, the question that concerns everyone hangs in the air: can the country afford such leadership? And how about this twist? Cuban, as an experienced businessman, talks about tariffs. And here's where it gets interesting. Just imagine, this man apparently lives in some parallel universe where tariffs work according to their own laws. He, you see, thinks that introducing a 60% tariff on all goods from China is a brilliant idea. The administration is probably in a panic. But the most shocking thing, friends, is that this genius sincerely believes that China itself pays these tariffs. Yes, the same person who promised that Mexico would build the wall at its own expense is again demonstrating wonders of ignorance. It's just some kind of surreal theater of the absurd. Friends, just look at the political circus that has unfolded. The accusations against Mark Cuban of dishonesty are just the tip of the iceberg because they echo in the light of yesterday's events. The first day of Trump's triumphant return to the Oval Office turned out to be remarkably fiery. In just a few hours, he erupted with decrees that, like a thunderclap, fell upon the country. And how about this twist? Trump's decision to officially define gender as exclusively male or female became a real bombshell. Society was divided into two irreconcilable camps. Some rejoice, seeing this as a return to true values, while others are furiously branding it as a blatant disregard for the complex and multifaceted nature of gender identity in the modern world. Trump, without wasting a second, presented this as an act of restoring common sense, but opponents like Cuban remained absolutely adamant, tearing this initiative to shreds. Cuban lashed out not only at the policy itself but also at Trump's manipulative methods, which tend to divide society rather than unite the people he is called upon to lead. But that's not all, folks. Trump has taken up his favorite topic with renewed vigor: closing borders. This time, he is taking steps that threaten to turn legal border crossings into a real quest. Trump's supporters applaud, seeing this as strengthening national security, but business leaders like Cuban are sounding the alarm, predicting catastrophic economic consequences. After all, industries such as agriculture and construction are critically dependent on immigrant labor. And now the administration is in a panic. Closing the borders threatens to turn into an acute shortage of labor, which will hit everyone hard. My friends, just look at this political circus. When the hour of reckoning comes and fateful decisions need to be made, this person, as we have already seen, will listen exclusively to his eye. And we saw how this ends in those memorable debates. If he is not ready to listen to anyone, even when he is trying to convince us to give him our vote, how can we trust him with the reins of government? I have concepts for a plan, but I'm not president yet. How about that twist? When 40 or even 44 cabinet members turn away from him, warning against voting for his candidacy, when former Republican presidents, senators, both current and former, shout in one voice, "Don't vote for him." I just can't accept President Trump's continued claims that I should have betrayed my oath and refused to defend the Constitution. This is not a man of honor. He would have been given a chance, given the presumption of innocence, if anyone believed in his moral principles, his character, his honesty. But there is none, and that tells us everything. You don't want such a person to deal with unpredictability, do you? And you know, folks, just as terrible as the lack of ethics, morals, and honesty is his complete unwillingness to learn and grow. He is one of those rare specimens on our planet who seems to be getting dumber by the day. The administration must be in a panic. He was torn to shreds, ridiculed before the whole world. My friends, just look at what's going on in this political circus. Trump's return has caused a storm of emotions. Some rejoice, anticipating an era of strong hand, others froze in horror in anticipation of an imminent catastrophe. Mark Cuban, this implacable critic, openly declares, Trump's style of governing is chaos that will bury any hope of real progress. And remember how Cuban selflessly rooted for Kamala Harris during the election, dreaming of stopping the Trump locomotive? But, alas, fortune was on the side of the outrageous billionaire, leaving Cuban and his like-minded people in a state of deep disappointment. And now the country is split in two. Some applaud Trump's rapid decisions, others frantically prepare for unpredictable consequences. And what about Cuban? He, like a falcon, closely watches every step of the president, trying to figure out, are these bold moves the result of a brilliant calculation or just a cheap attempt to shine in the headlines? After all, it's not just political games that are at stake, but the future of America, folks. And how about this twist? Cuban, without mincing words, tears Trump's methods to shreds. He doesn't pay attention to details. How can you be president without getting to the heart of things? He would only give speeches and speak on random occasions. But when it comes to serious policies like tariffs or foreign relations, he just doesn't realize the consequences. He's going to bankrupt a bunch of small businesses. He's wielding a machete where a scalpel is needed. The administration is in a panic, folks, because Cuban has exposed the terrible truth. Trump, like an elephant in a china shop, is ready to smash the country's economy to smithereens. So, folks, Trump is back and immediately staged a real political circus. From gender issues to border battles, the very first day of his triumphant return to the Oval Office sparked a storm of outrage. But just imagine, Mark Cuban took offense at him not only because of this. The main stumbling block is Trump's maniacal trade policy, especially his love for Chinese imports. Cuban, as you know, never keeps silent when he sees an economic catastrophe, and here he declared for all to hear, the emperor has no clothes. He is convinced that Trump is simply unable to understand how trade affects our economy. And how about this twist? Trump's previous administration was marked by an explosive growth in tariffs, which, like a tsunami, raised prices on imports from China by as much as 60%. Cuban is sure that this was a shot in the foot that hit ordinary Americans the hardest. After all, higher tariffs mean an automatic increase in prices for everything from smartphones to jeans. Families who were already barely making ends meet found themselves in an even more difficult situation. But that's not all. Business is also groaning under the burden of these measures because many companies depend on imported materials and components to stay afloat and compete. Cuban indignantly emphasizes that this policy does not simply punish China, as Trump boasted, but mercilessly hits Americans in the pocket. The administration seems to be panicking, not knowing how to fix what has been done. Friends, just imagine this political circus. Voting for Donald Trump as a business candidate? That's absurd. After all, what does business need, whether it's a tiny shop or a giant corporation? That's right, stability. Just imagine yourself in the place of the CEO of John Deere who wakes up in the morning and finds that tariffs on his products have suddenly skyrocketed. Or be in the shoes of Carrier Air when they are threatened with a finger for trying to move employees. Such decisions are built and calculated for years, and here, a bolt from the blue. Stability is the alpha and omega for big business, and for small business, just the opportunity to work and develop peacefully. But that's not all, folks. According to Mark Cuban, a real tariff storm awaits us in world trade. Raising tariffs is not just a shot in the foot for one country, it is a shockwave that will smash international trade to smithereens. Countries will begin to retaliate, enterprises will barely survive, and uncertainty will stifle any spark of growth. Cuban warns that such games could deal a crushing blow to America's reputation as a reliable trading partner. And how about this twist, folks? Cuban is shocked that Trump's decisions seem to be made without the slightest foresight, as if the administration is panicking and cutting the branch it is sitting on. In his opinion, Trump's approach is pure reaction, an impulsive shot in the dark. And where will we end up with this? It's scary to imagine. Friends, just listen. Mark Cuban, like a voice crying in the wilderness, tirelessly repeats, trade policy is not just a political game, it is a strategic chess move. The introduction of tariffs may shoot off like fireworks on the front pages of newspapers, but, according to Cuban, this is just a smokescreen that hides real problems, from blatant theft of intellectual property to egregious trade injustice. It's not about dry numbers and percentages, but about the foundation of any economy, trust. And how about this twist? Cuban is sure that the decisions of the Trump administration, like a house of cards, are destroying this very trust, without which investment and business growth are impossible. He tore this policy to shreds, calling it nothing less than reckless and creating a most dangerous precedent. While the economy is already cracking at the seams, Cuban's criticism sounds like an alarm. Is this trade policy a salvation or a curse? A question that divides society and to which there is no simple answer. But Cuban is not going to back down. He stands his ground like a rock. He is sounding the alarm. Bad trade decisions are not just a headache for business, they are a punch in the gut for each of us. And, as if foreseeing the coming changes, he sarcastically adds that soon we will rename the Gulf of Mexico to the American Gulf and return Mount Denali to its historical name, Mount McKinley, in honor of the great President William McKinley. So be it as it should be. Friends, just look at the political storm that has broken out. Mark Cuban, without mincing words, tore Donald Trump's trade policy to shreds, and that, is just the tip of the iceberg. Cuban's criticism is not just disagreement with economic steps, it is a real challenge to the former president's intelligence and competence. Cuban, like a gladiator in the arena, mercilessly attacks Trump, declaring that he has absolutely no understanding of what it means to be a leader. For Cuban, running an entire country is not a game of Monopoly, it is a complex task that requires deep knowledge and strategic thinking. And how about this twist? Cuban questions even Trump's business acumen, recalling a series of high-profile bankruptcies. According to Cuban, this shows that Trump's vaunted business acumen is just a myth. But that's not all. Cuban is furious at how Trump, as president, makes important decisions. Instead of assembling a team of experts and listening to their opinions, Trump, according to Cuban, relies solely on his instincts. And here's the result: hasty, ill-considered decisions that, like a house of cards, collapse under the pressure of reality. Trump's trade policy, according to Cuban, is a prime example of such short-sightedness, capable of causing irreparable damage to the economy. The administration is probably in a panic. Friends, just imagine this political circus that unfolded in the midst of the pandemic in 2020. When demand for oil collapsed, Russia and Saudi Arabia, like two enraged elephants, clashed in a merciless price war. Gas prices collapsed to unprecedented lows. And then the oil magnates come on the scene, running to Donald Trump with pleas for help. Envious in Saudi Arabia, Putin, get them together, persuade them to cut production so that prices skyrocket. That's what they demanded. And how about this twist? Trump faced a choice: save the sinking oil companies or help ordinary people suffering from the pandemic and dreaming of low gas prices. And what did he choose? He made a deal with the devil, convincing the oil kings to cut production to such an extent that prices soared like a rocket. And then, over the next 2 years, they gradually increased production to bring prices down a bit. But, my friends, it was too late. The reduction in oil production became the spark that ignited the flame of inflation. Trump, with a maniacal persistence repeating drill, 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 unwittingly became the culprit of rising prices for all goods and services. The administration was probably in a panic. By the time he left office, oil prices had reached exorbitant heights, transportation costs had skyrocketed, and all this led to a domino effect that hit the country's economy. That's the story, folks. A story about how the road to hell of inflation is paved with good intentions. Friends, just imagine Mark Cuban, like an experienced surgeon, dissects Trump's policies, leaving no stone unturned. He, like a herald of truth, questions Trump's understanding of global challenges and, I must say, his arguments are devastating. Cuban, without mincing words, tears Trump's approach to international relations to shreds, calling it nothing less than personal animosity disguised as strategic goals. And how about this twist? According to Cuban, this short-sighted policy not only drives America into isolation but also undermines its influence on the world stage. Instead of solving pressing problems, Trump, like an ostrich, hides his head in the sand, rejecting any criticism. Cuban is sure that this indicates an unwillingness to grow and change. Remember at least his. Sounds impressive, of course, but how real and well thought out is it? Cuban, like a wise old man, reminds us that intelligence is more than just erudition. A true leader, in his opinion, must have humility, the ability to listen, and foresight, and not chase after fleeting victories. And here, according to Cuban, Trump fails with a resounding crash. He even dared to declare that Trump's decisions are nothing more than a PR campaign designed to please his ego and not a sincere desire to solve the country's problems. The administration must be in a panic from such revelations. Friends, just think about it. Mark Cuban's criticism is not just words thrown to the wind, no. It is a cry from the soul based on the unwavering belief that leaders must be crystal clear, like a mountain stream, wise, like Socrates, and far-sighted, like chess grandmasters. They must learn, and learn again, learning lessons even from the most bitter mistakes. For Cuban, Trump's approach is not just an unfortunate mistake, it is a real disaster, a time bomb under the foundation of the state. And so, the political circus continues. Trump triumphantly enters his new term, and Cuban's alarm bells do not subside, but ring louder and more desperately. And how about this twist, folks? Cuban asks questions that the administration is probably panicking and rushing through the corridors of power. What is this leadership based on? On a mighty intellect capable of calculating every move? Or is it just a carefully staged performance, a farce behind which emptiness is hidden? The question, of course, is stinging, striking down on the spot.